3 years ago, my only sister, the person I relied on most, was murdered by a man who broke into our home. She had hidden me in the closet before it happened, so I never saw the killer's face. But I did catch a strange, pungent scent clinging to his body, something I had never smelled before, something unnatural. It wasn't until 3 years later, when I killed that man with my own hands, that I finally understood. The scent I had been chasing for 3 long years wasn't just a smell. It was a memory. It was a sweltering summer night in June of 2000. That night, my sister, the person who had raised me, was murdered in her own bedroom by a man she had trusted. Afterward, the neighbors all said she had brought it upon herself, because she had invited the man into our home, because she had been that kind of woman. Whenever we had visitors, she always made me hide in the little storage room. Lights off. No talking. No peeking, no noise. That night was no different, except that after everything was over, after the man suffocated her with a pillow and took the money she'd worked so hard to save, I stayed hidden for what felt like hours before I realized something was wrong. I crept out of the storage room, my heart pounding, and went to my sister's bedroom. She was lying on the bed perfectly still. I called out to her softly, afraid to wake her if she was only asleep. But her hand was cold as ice. The police came the next day and took away my sister's body. They said they were taking me to a shelter, a place packed with homeless kids like me, a place where strangers would come and choose children to take home. I ran. I didn't want to be adopted. I didn't want kindness. I didn't want comfort. I wanted revenge. I swore to myself, before the police found him, I would find him, and I would kill him with my own hands. For her. Maybe to the rest of the world, my sister was just a disgrace. Just another girl with a bad reputation. But to me, she was everything. Past, present, future, she was the only one who had ever loved me. I hated the man who took her from me. I hated him so much it burned. Even if it meant losing my life, I was going to make sure I killed him myself. And I believed, no, I knew, I could find him before the cops ever did. Because even though I never saw his face that night, I remembered something the police would never understand. That smell. It was unlike anything else, faint, unnatural, and unforgettable. Ever since I was little, I've had an unusually sensitive sense of smell. Once I caught a scent, even just once, it would be burned into my memory, impossible to forget. But that night, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't clearly recall exactly what that man's scent was. I knew I had smelled it. I knew it was distinct. But I couldn't pin it down. After my sister died, I started living on the streets. I wandered through crowded marketplaces, busy sidewalks, bus terminals, anywhere people gathered. I was chasing that scent, chasing the truth. I imagined that man must have had some kind of rare job or maybe even a hidden identity. Maybe that was why he carried a smell no ordinary person ever would, a scent so unique, so abnormal that I'd never encountered anything like it since. I met countless people in those years. I brushed past thousands of bodies, breathed in every kind of cologne, sweat, oil, smoke, and city filth imaginable. But none of it matched that man's scent. Just like that, 3 whole years slipped by. I'd started to wonder if maybe the man had left the city, or died. Or maybe he had never really existed at all. Just a ghost in my memory. Then yesterday, at an ordinary intersection downtown, someone brushed past me. They were bundled up tight, coat, scarf, even gloves completely wrapped up despite the summer heat. And in that instant, that same scent, his scent, the one I had been chasing for 3 long years, rushed straight into my nose like a lightning strike. In that moment, it felt like every cell in my body caught fire. I immediately began tailing them silently, carefully, keeping my distance as I watched them walk toward one of the city's old housing blocks, marked for demolition. I made a decision right then and there. The next time I saw them, I would attack. I would kill them before they had a chance to hurt anyone else. That night, I camped outside the building where they lived. I hid in the shadows beneath the stairwell, waiting, barely breathing, for hours. I stayed there until noon the next day. And when they finally walked out of the building again, I sprang from my hiding place and rushed forward, blade clenched in my hand, ready to end it all, only to freeze when I saw her face. It wasn't a man at all. It was a woman. Tall, striking, beautiful, and in her wide, startled eyes, I saw only confusion, no guilt, no recognition, no malice. My heart dropped, and I ran. I ran all the way back to camp. It was a makeshift place tucked behind a massive landfill, one of the few corners of the city that belonged solely to us drifters. I'd been staying there for nearly 6 months now, crashing there most nights when I had nowhere else to go. When I returned, a scruffy blonde guy everyone called Rusty waved at me. He handed me half a can of beef stew, already eaten from, and God knows where he'd found it. I took it with a nod and murmured, "Thanks." "Dude," Rusty said, eyeing me, "you didn't come back last night. You out chasing that guy again, the one who killed your sister?" I nodded. Man, even the cops gave up. What's the point of torturing yourself? I kept my head down, shoveling spoonfuls of beef into my mouth. But the food wouldn't go down. You don't even know what the guy looks like. Don't say that, I muttered, pushing the can back into his hands and giving him a cold look. All right, he said, shrinking back with a half smile. There it is again, that face. Like you're ready to kill someone. Rusty always had a way of trying to lighten the mood when things got too heavy. He scratched his head and gave me a lopsided grin. But for real, man, I respect you, he added. Living like this just so you can get justice for your sister? That's straight up noble, like something out of an old legend. I gave him a tired smile, but inside, my chest ached all over again. Rusty finished off the can, then said suddenly, "Hey, you hear the city's cracking down on illegal camps?" I nodded, I heard. Think they'll send people like us to detention shelters? He gave me a quick glance, then shrugged. They might. But let me ask you, if you could live somewhere safe, warm, and stable, would you take it? I looked at him. Would you? Rusty licked his lips and leaned back dramatically. What? You think you're the only one who wants to be a wandering hero? You don't get to corner the market on vengeance and destiny. He pointed a finger at me, trying to look serious. If you ever find that bastard who killed your sister, don't do anything reckless. Call me, got it? I'll help you take him down. I let out a soft laugh and said, "Sure. I mean it, man," Rusty said, his voice getting intense. You're small, thin arms, skinny legs. You go up against a killer like that, you'll die in 5 seconds. His expression was dead serious. To be honest, man, we're both out here living rough, yeah. But you? You still remember what it feels like to love someone. Me? Not so much. I didn't have anyone like that. He paused, then added, "If you ever go visit your sister's grave, bring me along. I'd like to pay my respects." Rusty had a tendency to get a little sentimental once he got going. Couldn't stop talking when his emotions kicked in. "Get some sleep," I said, patting him on the shoulder. I hadn't slept in days. More than anything, I just wanted to close my eyes and see her in my dreams. I dreamed of my sister again. She was holding me gently, stroking my hair like she used to. She asked, "You don't think I'm dirty, do you?" "No, never. I never thought you were dirty, sis. I always knew. You were just trying to help us survive." "Sweetheart," she said softly, "once I've saved up enough money, I'll buy us a place of our own. Then I'll take you out for good food every day, to places you've never been. We'll travel the world. I'd never want to leave you, never." She held me tighter, and then she began to cry. And then I felt it, something pulling her away from me. That man with a strange scent clinging to his body. She screamed for help, reaching out, trying to hold on to me, while he grabbed her and dragged her back into the dark. I screamed too. Let go of my sister. I fought to keep her with me, but the next thing I knew, I was awake. Rusty was shaking me hard. "Damn, kid, talk about a nightmare. Get up, we gotta go. The city cops are really here this time." My eyes were still foggy with sleep, but I saw them, vans pulling up just beyond the trash heap. A swarm of uniformed city officers jumped out, flashlights sweeping across our camp, setting off chaos and shouting, "Run! If they catch you, they'll drag you off to a detention center." Rusty took off toward the back of the garbage hill, and I scrambled after him. Behind us, the city enforcers were yelling, "Stop right there!" In the dark, we clambered up the side of the trash, mound, hands and feet slipping on unstable debris. Just as we dropped down the other side, a beam of light caught us. Well, look what we've got, 2 little rats right where we expected," one of them sneered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and he looked like he meant trouble. I froze. Rusty didn't. Before I could stop him, he charged the officer. "Rusty," I cried. "Run, man! Don't forget, you owe your sister justice." He lunged, but the officer sidestepped him easily, and Rusty hit the ground hard. He glanced back at me, desperate. "Why are you still standing there? Go!" I turned and bolted for the small gate at the far end of the dump. Just as I reached it, I heard a loud thud behind me. Rusty had been kicked, hard. He lay face down on the ground, unmoving. "Rusty, thank you!" I shouted. He slowly lifted his head, one arm reaching up as if to wave, or maybe make a sign. I couldn't tell from the distance. But even then, I could just make out the curve of a smile on his bruised face. A few days later, I was wandering the streets again, when I heard people murmuring about a news story out of Guangzhou. A young man named Ken Walters, they said, had died in a detention center after being beaten, just because he didn't have a residence permit. They didn't know who he really was. But I did. Rusty. That was his real name. I didn't know what had happened to the others. Grayson, Wolf, Prince. All friends I had made back in the camp. I never saw any of them again. Maybe those who are meant to return will return one day. And maybe those meant to die were never meant to survive. The day after Rusty and the others were taken away, I was back on the trail, following the woman with the strange scent. Even though she wasn't the one who murdered my sister, I was certain she was connected to the man who did. If I kept watching, I knew I'd eventually find the truth. Her name was Sunny Hill. She wasn't very old, maybe in her mid-20s, and lived alone on the second floor of an old walk-up apartment. I knew she lived by herself because I never saw anyone else come or go from her unit. No family, no roommates. Her job was unremarkable. She ran a small clothing boutique on a quiet street corner near City Heart Hospital. The intersection got a decent amount of foot traffic, but most people passing through were either rushing to see a doctor or visiting patients. So despite the location, her little store didn't seem to be doing especially well. To be honest, Sunny didn't strike me as someone particularly business savvy. Other than her background, though, there was one detail that stood out, the strongest clue I had so far. Sunny had a boyfriend. I discovered it on Valentine's Day. She came home holding a large bouquet of flowers, practically skipping with joy. The moment I saw her like that, I knew the strange scent that clung to her had something to do with him. But here was the problem. I had never seen the guy before. Of course, I wasn't tailing her 24/7. Even when I followed her, I made sure to keep a safe distance. After all, she'd spotted me once already. If I started showing up too frequently near her home or her shop, she'd get suspicious, and I couldn't afford to draw attention to myself. So I kept reminding myself, don't rush it. I'd waited this long. If she was the bait, then I needed to let the fish bite the hook on its own time. 2 weeks after Rusty and the others were taken by city officials, I finally saw Sunny's boyfriend. He was tall and lean, in his early 30s maybe, with sharp features and a quiet charm. He looked like one of those soft-spoken idols from the 90s, like a young Damon Lee. When I saw him, I realized something. I'd actually seen this guy before. He'd been to Sunny's shop more than once, but each time, he walked in like a casual window shopper. He barely glanced at the merchandise, never spoke to Sunny, and would leave within minutes. He acted like a stranger, just killing time, which is why I never made the connection, never guessed he was her boyfriend. But this time something was different. After he left the store, I started picking up on subtle details. He hadn't said a word to her, but Sunny had walked up to him and handed him a jacket to try on. The moment he slipped it over his shoulders, it fit perfectly, as if she already knew his exact size. When he went to the mirror to check the fit, Sunny leaned forward just a little too much. Her body tilted toward his back, like she wanted to wrap her arms around him. All those little gestures, things most people would miss, they told me everything. Sunny didn't just know this man. She was intimate with him. They were pretending not to know each other. Why? Was Sunny his mistress? Were they hiding something? The moment the man stepped out of the store, I followed. I didn't need to see his face again to confirm it. I could smell it. That same unforgettable scent. Strange, distinct, and unique to him. It was him, the man who murdered my sister. But I hadn't expected how cautious he would be. He'd barely taken a few steps outside when he started glancing over his shoulder, scanning the street like a hawk. His awareness of his surroundings was unusually sharp. I didn't risk following him too closely, but it didn't matter. I knew who he was now. And a few days later, I saw him again, this time walking into a hospital building a few blocks away. That's when it all clicked. He was a doctor. No wonder Sunny opened her boutique so close to the hospital. What kind of scent would cling to a doctor? The smell of alcohol? Hydrogen peroxide? Disinfectant? Medications? Whatever it was, I had smelled all of those before, inside hospitals. They weren't unique. Unless the doctor in question specialized in treating rare or infectious diseases and personally prepared medications for patients, there'd be no reason for a distinct scent to linger on their body. But even that explanation didn't fully hold up. If such a scent came from a doctor's work, then surely their patients would carry it too. And yet, in the past 3 years, I had only ever smelled that specific scent on one person, Sunny Hill. The same scent I'd caught the night my sister was murdered. No matter how I tried to rationalize it, nothing added up. I still didn't understand the source of that strange smell. But one thing was certain. My next target to follow was going to be the mysterious doctor. But tailing him turned out to be far more difficult than I expected. Like Sunny, he was highly alert. Multiple times, just as I was getting close to him outside the hospital, he would instinctively glance over his shoulder, scanning the crowd. It was like he knew someone was tracking him. And keeping watch outside the hospital? That was a nightmare. Every time the security guards saw me hanging around, they chased me off like I was loitering or trying to beg for food. If I kept my distance, I lost all visibility once the sun went down. I couldn't tell when he clocked out or even which entrance he used. Ever since I got spotted by Sunny outside her building, I'd grown far more cautious. I told myself, slow is better than sloppy. If I had to choose between speed and certainty, I'd take certainty every time. If I couldn't get to him through the hospital, I'd have to go back to Sunny. There was no way those two were just casually meeting up at her shop. It was too deliberate. My chance came sooner than expected. Ever since I started tailing Sunny, she'd gone to work early nearly every morning. But that day, she didn't come downstairs until late afternoon. She was carrying a large handbag, her makeup carefully done, every detail perfect. It was obvious. She was going to meet someone important. I followed her from a distance. She was in a good mood. I could tell from the bounce in her step, the way she occasionally walked on her tiptoes, like she was dancing to a song only she could hear. But she didn't seem to be in any rush. Every now and then, she'd stop and lean over to smell the primroses, planted along the sidewalk. It took me a while to track her destination. She wandered slowly, weaving through back streets, until she arrived at an unfinished park on the edge of the city, somewhere quiet and almost completely deserted. Sunny walked into the park, picked a bench under a tree, and sat down. She didn't look like she was waiting for anyone. She looked relaxed, like she was out on a solo picnic. I watched her pull a large bento box from her handbag. She lifted the lid, revealing a beautifully arranged meal. But instead of eating, she simply looked at it for a moment, then gently closed the lid and placed it back inside her bag, like she just wanted to admire it. Time passed slowly. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the park. Still, she didn't leave. It was clear she was waiting for someone. Around 8 p.m., I finally crept out of my hiding spot to take a short walk nearby, hoping to get a better vantage point. But just as I stepped out of the park, someone came rushing toward me, and we nearly collided. He barely looked at me as he passed, but I recognized him instantly. It was the doctor. Sonny's mystery man. I exhaled in relief, grateful he hadn't taken notice of me or sensed anything suspicious. But just as I relaxed, a deeper confusion crept into my mind. Because when he brushed past me, I didn't smell anything. Not a trace of the scent I had spent 3 years chasing. That unforgettable scent, the one that haunted me like a curse, was completely absent. Had I been wrong this whole time? The park had fallen completely into darkness. Only the pale glow of moonlight lit up the trees, the narrow paths, and the weathered benches that still smelled faintly of fresh paint. But lovers don't care about things like that. To them, even an unfinished park on a chilly night could be romantic, magical even. From a distance, I watched Sunny Hill and the doctor. Sunny pulled out the same bento box she'd taken from her bag earlier and placed it gently in front of him on the bench. They were talking. But I'd hidden too far away, I couldn't make out a single word. My mind drifted back to earlier, when I'd brushed past the doctor on the path. There had been no scent on him. None of that scent. So then, the strange smell on Sunny, could it really not have come from him? If not him, then who else had she been in contact with? But there was no one else. It didn't make any sense. It was like chasing ghosts. Just as I was starting to spiral in my thoughts, something caught my eye. Sunny was crying. Even from this distance, I could see her covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook, trembling violently. The bento box tipped off the bench and spilled across the ground. The doctor looked stunned, frozen in place. He didn't know what to do. Sunny said something to him through her sobs. I couldn't hear what it was, but whatever she said must have snapped him out of it. He reached out and slowly pulled her into an embrace. She leaned into him, resting in his arms, but only for a minute or two. Then suddenly she shoved him away and stood up. What happened next stunned me. Sunny began to undress, one piece at a time. Her sweater, her jacket, her jeans. She peeled them off, every layer she had on, casting each one aside as if shedding more than just fabric. Under the moonlight, her silhouette was cast in sharp relief. It hit me like a punch, raw, real, and almost surreal in its beauty. And yet, I couldn't look away. I didn't want to admit it. But there was something hauntingly perfect about her figure in that moment. Then Sunny took a few steps back, standing before the man with her arms spread wide, as if offering herself or pleading for something unseen. She said something. I couldn't hear the first time. But the second time, her voice rose, clear enough for me to catch. "Hold me!" she cried. But the doctor's reaction was the last thing I expected. He clamped a hand over his mouth and a low, ragged sound rose from his throat, like a man choking on grief or fear. Then, without warning, he jumped to his feet and ran, bolted. Really? Into the darkness like he couldn't get away fast enough. And Sunny? She started laughing, but it wasn't joy in her voice. Her laughter was hollow, bleak, like something inside her had finally cracked. She laughed and laughed, then slowly crouched down and began picking up the food that had spilled across the ground. She clutched the bento box to her chest, and in the cold, damp night, completely naked, she curled up on the dirt and began to sob uncontrollably. After that night, I kept returning to the building where Sunny Hill lived, watching from a distance. But she didn't come out again. Not once. She didn't even go back to the boutique. I was out of options. Even if she wasn't leaving her apartment, I had no choice but to keep watch. Because I already knew that her connection to that doctor, the one without the scent, was important. He wasn't the one I was hunting. But Sunny still was. She was the only person in 3 long years who had carried that scent on her body. Whatever it took, I had to keep waiting. 2 weeks later, on a gray afternoon, she finally reappeared outside that old, shadowed apartment complex. Her makeup was perfect again. She wore the same white sweater from before and carried the same tan handbag, but her expression had changed. Gone was the lightness I'd seen the last time. Her face was calm, cold, distant. I followed her quietly again and saw her walk all the way back to the same park, to the same bench where she had met with the doctor. She sat down motionless, still as a statue. Was she waiting for him? I crept closer than last time, choosing a new hiding spot where I could see more clearly. The evening descended slowly. The light grew dim. The moon began to cast its quiet silver over Sunny's expressionless face. Then came footsteps. A shadow approached, lean, fast-moving. It was him, the doctor. He stopped in front of Sunny but didn't sit. He stood there, awkward and tense. From this distance, I could just barely hear his voice riding the breeze. "Sunny, after today, let's end this. For real this time. No more, whatever this is. Okay?" She lifted her face and gave him a faint smile. Then she set her handbag beside her on the bench, stood up, and opened her arms. "Hold me," she said. He stared at her, stunned. "Just once. One last time." Her voice was soft, gentle. He hesitated, just a moment, then slowly, almost reluctantly, stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Watching them embrace, I couldn't help but think of my sister. She used to hug me all the time back then. Back before hugs are strange things. Sometimes they mean you never want to let go. Other times they mean goodbye. Sunny clung tightly to the man, a soft sound slipping from her lips, half sigh, half moan. One of her hands gripped his back. The other emerged with a knife. Before I could even react, the blade drove deep into his spine. The man cried out and collapsed to his knees. Sunny stepped behind him, yanked the knife free, and circled back into his view. Sunny, please, he gasped, his voice hoarse with panic. She didn't respond. She stepped over his body and with terrifying calm, plunged the knife into him again, once, twice. I saw blood splatter across her pale face, thick and dark against her porcelain skin. 3 times. 4. She let out a high-pitched, animal-like laugh, a sharp, broken cackle like a feral cat in heat. The sound echoed through the empty park. Haunting. The man stopped moving. Sunny straightened her back, then let out a soft, breathless chuckle. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. She laughed until her voice gave out. Then wordlessly, she leaned down, grabbed the body by the wrists, and began to drag it toward the trees. And me? I was already hidden inside that very patch of woods. Watching everything, the sound of the corpse dragging across the grass made a sickening scraping noise. It was getting closer, closer to me. So close, I could almost feel those lifeless eyes staring directly at my hiding spot. Accusing, unblinking. A cold prickle ran up my spine. Was she going to see me? What would I do if she did? Should I run? Or should I lunge at her, end it right here, right now? But if I killed her, I might lose the only thread I had left. All of it would unravel. Then, to my surprise, Sunny stopped dragging the body just a few yards away from me. She didn't look around, didn't even glance in my direction. She simply let go of the man's arms, stood up, and calmly walked back out of the park. The body remained there, sprawled awkwardly in the grass, his dead eyes fixed on the trees, on me. I didn't dare turn my head. I was too afraid that if I moved, I'd find her standing right behind me, knife in hand, smiling. But the moments ticked by. Eventually, the silence told me everything. She was gone. It was just me now, me and the body. I slowly rose to my feet and took a deep breath. I had to find her. Whatever she was, madwoman or monster, I needed to know what that damn scent was. That scent that had haunted me for 3 years. It was the key to everything. To vengeance. To my sister's death. Her apartment door wasn't locked. Just slightly ajar. The lights in the living room were off, but there was a faint glow coming from the bedroom at the far end of the hall. And from that room, I could hear strange, strained breathing. I stepped through the doorway. It was the first time I'd ever been inside Sunny's home. The moment I crossed the threshold, my nose was hit with a rush of scent, strong, distinct, unforgettable. That was it. That was the smell. The one I'd been chasing for 3 long years. It was everywhere, saturating the air like invisible ink. So thick I could taste it. I held my breath, steadied my nerves, and made my way toward the lit bedroom. I was halfway there when something brushed against my shoulder. I turned and nearly screamed. Hanging from the ceiling fan in the center of the living room was a dark shape. Sunny, completely naked, suspended by the neck from a rope tied around the fan blade. Her body swung slightly in the air, pale limbs motionless. She had hung herself. Right there, in her living room. Daniel stared at Sunny's lifeless body, still faintly warm, and swallowed hard. She'd actually gone through with it. She'd really taken her own life. But the light in the bedroom was still on. There was something or someone waiting for him inside. Then he heard it. A man's grunting and wheezing, muffled but clear. There was someone else in that room. And Daniel could sense it. Down to his bones. This man was the true source of the scent. The same scent from that night. The one that clung to his sister's corpse. He was the one Daniel had come here to kill. Slowly, carefully, Daniel crept forward and pushed open the bedroom door. What he saw inside rendered him speechless. A man, probably in his late 40s or early 50s, was sprawled naked on the bed, furiously raking a fruit knife across his own body. His skin was shredded and soaked in blood. The flesh beneath laid bare like meat at a butcher's counter. It was like he was trying to carve himself apart, piece by piece. But he didn't stop. Even as the blood poured from him, he kept cutting. And in the thick metallic stench of blood, Daniel finally caught it again. That smell. It was pouring out of this man's body, bleeding from his wounds. The same smell he'd hunted for 3 years. The same one that haunted his every nightmare. Daniel's voice came out as a growl. It was you. You killed my sister. Didn't you? The man looked up in confusion, dazed, as if he'd just now noticed Daniel in the room. Die! Daniel roared, launching himself at him. The man screamed and rolled off the bed, and the two of them crashed to the floor in a violent tangle. Then Daniel felt it, a sudden piercing cold in his gut. The man had grabbed the fruit knife and driven it into him. Who the hell are you? You filthy stray? The man muttered. Daniel collapsed onto the floor, the cold steel still buried in his abdomen. Warm blood trickled out around the blade, spreading across his belly. He groaned, low and painful, trying to suppress his cries so the man would think he'd won. Think it was over. The man leaned his head back against the wall, gasping for breath. That was the moment Daniel had been waiting for. He lunged. Caught completely off guard. The man didn't even react before Daniel slammed the blade. He'd hidden deep into his neck. Blood sprayed across the wall in a crimson arc. Daniel clung to him, refusing to let go. Die, 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 he screamed over and over. Those were the only words pounding through his skull. Sister, are you watching? I did it. I avenged you. Narrator, Detective Nathan Chen. It was just past midnight when I got the call from the precinct. I was still groggy, half asleep, but the words on the other end jolted me upright. There were 3 separate murders in the city last night, said Officer Carter, the one assigned to brief me. I sat up in bed, grabbed my phone, and listened as he continued with the case details. The first body was found in an unfinished park development on the outskirts of town. Victim's name is Dr. Paul Yates, 29, a pulmonologist at City General Hospital. Cause of death appears to be multiple stab wounds. The second crime scene is in the Happy Pines apartments. Female victim, named Sunny Hill, owner of a small clothing boutique. She died by suicide. We've already looked into it. Before he could finish, my burner phone died. Battery completely drained. I tossed it onto the bed with a frustrated sigh. Nothing I could do but get dressed and head down to the station. By the time I arrived at the precinct, most of the team had already left for the second crime scene. Officer Carter had gone ahead with the forensics crew, so I followed suit and drove straight to Happy Pines. It was nearly dawn when I got there. The scene was on the second floor. As soon as I entered the apartment, I saw Carter and our forensic tech, Dr. Michelle Chen, already hard at work. There was a body in the living room, covered with a white sheet. I assumed it was the woman, Sunny. What's the story here? I asked. Carter stood and walked over. Sunny Fields left a long suicide note. In it, she confessed to killing Paul Yates. Any motive? Well, they used to date. She got sick with a rare skin condition and broke up with him. Later, he got engaged to someone else. But apparently, they started seeing each other again behind his fiancé's back. Carter continued. Sunny probably thought he was stringing her along, pretending. He still cared while hiding her away like a shameful secret. That triggered something in her. She killed him out of spite. What kind of illness? Merkert's disease, he said grimly. I blinked. What? Extremely rare genetic skin disorder. It's a severe form of ichthyosis, Michelle chimed in, calmly flipping through her notes. There have only been a few thousand documented cases globally. Never expected to see it in a small town like ours. I walked over to the body and lifted the sheet. One look and my skin crawled. She must have been beautiful once. Her face still retained traces of it, but her arms, legs, and abdomen. The skin there didn't look human. It resembled something reptilian. No, worse than reptilian. Like she was shedding some monstrous version of herself. Let's check the other body, Michelle reminded me. Right. There was still another corpse in the bedroom. Sunny's father, right? How'd he die? You'll see, she said, tone oddly cryptic. I stepped into the bedroom and immediately froze. Propped against the wall was a naked male corpse, skin flayed nearly to the bone. The shredded flesh on his body bore the same terrifying texture as Sunny's. And on the floor beside him, a border collie? I murmured. Yeah, Carter replied. Sunny's father was apparently mauled to death by this dog. The dog was filthy, matted in dried blood. It looked like a stray. Its stomach had been pierced by a blade, dead for hours, maybe longer. But something about it felt familiar. I crouched down to examine the body more closely. My eyes narrowed at the old rusted tag still hanging from its collar. The name was faint but still legible. This dog, it wasn't just any stray. It was the same puppy I'd seen 3 years ago, in the apartment of a girl who'd been murdered in the Pine Grove Hills complex. The girl was a teenage sex worker. I remembered the case vividly. I'd almost adopted this very dog afterward, until it mysteriously vanished. Run the test, now. I stood and barked at Carter. Wait, what? He flinched. Test the male victim's DNA. Match it against the trace hairs we recovered 3 years ago at Pine Grove Hills, those we believed belonged to the killer of that teenage girl. I looked him dead in the eyes. We finally have the equipment for DNA comparison this year, don't we? The DNA results were in. The man, the one Sunny Fields had killed, was her father. And more than that, he was the murderer from the case 3 years ago. The same man who had killed the runaway girl. The entire team was stunned. Merkert's disease didn't just wreak havoc on the body. It weighed heavily on the mind, too. According to global medical data, a significant portion of those with advanced stages of the disease eventually develop severe psychological instability. So it tracked. Sunny's father, likely in the throes of mental deterioration, had taken a life. But what shocked us even more wasn't just the identity of the killer. It was the dog. That border collie. How the hell had it found him? Smell, Dr. Michelle Chen explained when I asked. Dogs can distinguish thousands of scents. Some are even trained to detect cancer. That collie must have been able to pick up the distinct scent that comes from Merkert's patients. It's an incredibly rare disease, and it releases a unique chemical odor. That dog had tracked the man down, waited. For 3 years. We later confirmed that after the murder 3 years ago, Sunny's father had moved her to another city. They only came back last year, and even then, due to his worsening condition, he'd become a shut-in, never once leaving the house. Yet that dog still found him. tracked him down, and waited. We all fell silent. Even the most jaded officers in the room looked a little choked up. Can we find out where the girl from 3 years ago was buried? I asked Carter quietly. If it's possible, I think we should bury the collie next to her. Carter nodded solemnly. I'll make it happen. That evening when I got home, I was greeted by the loud bark of my golden retriever, Max. He came bouncing out of the hallway, tail wagging like a windmill. He wasn't really mine. I'd adopted him from a shelter not too long ago. He was loud and goofy but smart as hell and always glued to my side. I knelt down and rubbed his big, dumb head. Max leaned into my palm, nuzzling like he'd missed me all day. Hey, buddy, I whispered. You ever meet a border collie out there? One that used to wander the streets like you? Max tilted his head. That dog. He spent 3 years in the shadows, tracking down the man who killed his owner. 3 years, just to avenge her. I smiled, though my throat felt tight. That mutt? He had the spirit of a warrior. Like some kind of ancient knight in a fur coat. Max gave a soft, low whine, almost like he understood.